as Robert said, she's so, she understands that scientific practice in the state law. And the 16th jury will before somebody dies and prepare your zoning case for tonight before the city council. She understands the plight of the average lawyer today, not the big corporate lawyer, but those who actually represent the people. Now, the judge, one of your predecessors, who is now a head judge, Locke's son, Jeff Locke, he once said when he had your position, he said to me, taking care of the lawyers again, Mr. Creedon? I said, absolutely. I said, this isn't all about judges or clerks or probation or custodians. It's about the people's forum where their civil and criminal matters can be dealt with fairly. And who represents the people? The lawyers. So this individual here understands that. Let me conclude by a little hyperbole. If you held this meeting in Brockton, I think we could fill Marciano Stadium with people who would attest to her fitness to sit on the bench. And I think, as Judge Sullivan said, especially in the district court, which is busy, as those of you who practice law understand and know, she can handle the job. She was a terrific appointment by Judge Baker, and I would urge this council to move her forward.
Thank you very much.
Glad to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Oh, we're good. Thank you very much. Does that exhaust the folks who are going to testify?
Yes, it does.
Okay, at this point, before we hear from you, if you'd like to introduce family and or friends, that's up to you.
Yes. My mother is here, Alan Flavin. My mom's cousin, Elizabeth Dinan. I have my sister, Mara Graham, here, and her husband, Clinton Graham, my brother-in-law, as well as my 3-month-old niece, Vivian.
You going to testify? I'll make that determination. Thank you. At this point, we'll hear from you. You can tell us a little about your background and why you think you'd be a good addition to the court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for scheduling this hearing. Good morning, councilors, and thank you for your time today and affording me this opportunity to speak to why I want to be an Associate Justice of the District Court. I want to start by thanking Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for their confidence in me and for nominating me to the District Court. I want to thank Governor's Chief Legal Counsel, Bob Ross. I want to thank the Judicial Nominating Commission. I also want to thank Lauren Green Petrigno, the Executive Director of the Judicial Nominating Commission, as well as Emily Gauthier, Katie Babin, and Valerie McCarthy for all their help and support throughout this process. I want to thank the Joint Bar Committee, and again, I want to thank the Governor's Council members for all their hard work and dedication and for giving me their time over the past week. I want to thank my witnesses, my boss, Clerk of Courts Robert Creedon, and the Honorable Justice William Sullivan, who've taken the time to speak on my behalf at this hearing. I'm grateful to my parents and all my family and friends who have contributed to my life and legal career and have helped me along this journey. I'm also grateful to all the people I work with in the courts each day, including my fellow clerks and staff in my office, the judges, the attorneys, the court officers, probation department employees, and maintenance staff who have made my time at Brockton Superior Court a wonderful experience over the past 5.5 years. I was born and raised in the Boston area by 2 parents who worked hard to raise me in the town of Milton. At a young age, I was exposed to the legal world through my father, an attorney, my grandfather, the chief probation officer at the Boston Municipal Court, and my mother, a legal secretary at a Boston law firm. That, coupled with my Catholic school upbringing, instilled in me that service to others was an important part of life. I attended court hearings on occasion with my father and watched the court proceedings, which was the first time I began thinking about attending law school and becoming a lawyer. During my senior year in high school at Ursuline Academy in Dedham, I volunteered in the clerk's office in Hingham District Court to perform a high school requirement of community service. It was after this job that I knew I always wanted to work in the courts. I attended Fairfield University in Connecticut, and after graduation, I applied to law school. I attended New England School of Law in the evening program. After my first year of law school, I had the good fortune to be accepted to do an internship at the Hale and Dorr Legal Services Center in Jamaica Plain. The Law Center provided low-cost or free legal services to low-income and indigent individuals in the community. I was tasked with handling cases in estate planning and bankruptcy under the supervision of an attorney. I loved working there very much. It was truly a great opportunity to help people. While working there, I met with and assisted clients from all walks of life, each with a different legal matter, and it was truly an honor to represent individuals with legal needs who could not afford private legal services. During my law school tenure, I worked full-time at the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office, and this afforded me an opportunity to watch courtroom proceedings over the years in both Brockton Superior and Brockton District Courts. After graduating law school, I moved to New Jersey and began working at a law firm litigating civil cases, both personal injury and landlord-tenant cases. Upon my move back to Massachusetts, I began working at a law firm specializing in plaintiffs' personal injury litigation. It was here that I attended hearings, trials, depositions, mediations, and arbitrations on a daily basis. Eventually, I also began practicing in the areas of construction law, probate and family law, and criminal law. In 2011, I opened my own practice in Milton and continued representing plaintiffs in personal injury cases, as well as in probate court for divorce and custody cases. I also continued to represent clients at hearings in the landlord-tenant and small claims sessions. It was over a 12-year period here in Massachusetts that I practiced civil and criminal law. In 2015, I became a Norfolk County bar advocate representing indigent clients accused of crimes. Through my work as a bar advocate, I was the on-duty attorney at Dedham, Quincy, and Brookline District Courts several days of the month, during which I'd be assigned many cases. I enjoyed spending those entire days in the district and helping people with criminal cases as well as mental health hearings and Section 35 petitions. I also soon discovered that in addition to assisting your clients, you often had the responsibility to keep their loved ones and family informed about the case, file bail petitions with the Superior Court, hire private investigators, and speak with witnesses. I loved making a real difference in the lives of my clients and the community as a whole. Throughout my career, I practiced in district, superior, and federal courts. However, most of my practice was in the district courts of the Commonwealth, and I've had the opportunity to practice in almost all of the sessions in the district court, including civil, criminal, landlord-tenant, small claims, drug, and veterans court. In 2017, I was hired as an assistant clerk in Plymouth County Superior Court. My 5.5 years in this position has been an amazing experience. I have clerked in both civil and criminal sessions, and I help people every day who come into the court. I endeavor to continue to help people in the courts as a district court judge because I feel the district courts are the courts of the people. It is in these courts that a judge can effectuate the most change in the lives of the people who come to the court and the communities they serve. This is why I want to continue my career as an associate justice of the district court. If confirmed to the district court, I will bring my compassion and empathy to each and every situation. I was taught throughout my upbringing to be compassionate to everyone because not everyone is as fortunate as I have been in my life. In closing, I ask for your vote and thank you again for this opportunity and for listening to me. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. At this point, we'll hear from Councilor Eileen Duff.
How are you? Thank you. Sorry, I just was informed that someone I spent a lot of time with this weekend tested positive, so I'm staying safe. It was great to speak to you, Attorney Jubinville. You were coming and persistent in getting a hold of me because other times. Can you share with us, what do you think? You know, you're in the court every day. You know, you see what's happening, you know the goings on. This isn't, I mean, it's a different job, but it's not a giant leap in some ways. What do you think the biggest challenge is that we're facing in the district courts right now?
I would say, I'd have to say, I think there are probably two. One being the substance abuse, mental health crisis that we're experiencing and that we, trying to try to make headway toward treating people and having rehabilitation as opposed to incarceration with people that have substance abuse issues as well as mental health issues. And the other challenge I see for the courts that's been ongoing has been kind of the implicit bias, racial discrimination part of that's been kind of ingrained in our court system, and we seem to be, well, we're working to try to change in ways.
Yeah.
Those seem to be kind of the dual challenges I see kind of facing all the courts in general.
Well, I can imagine in Brockton, where you are now, you're seeing, there's a lot of grit that you're dealing with, real, hard stuff.
Yes.
Do you feel that you have, because I've spoken to other nominees about this, and we spoke about it, one of my concerns, because you're a little on the young side, I don't hold that for or against somebody. I mean, I know some people think it matters. It's that to me, it's not necessarily a big thing. But do you feel if you go to the bench, you ascend to the bench, you would hopefully have a long career there? Do you feel like you have a strong enough support system? But, you've seen, your father's a public figure, right? People beat the crap out of you. They're gonna beat the crap out of you and about him just over this nomination. I mean, that's just how it is. But do you feel that you have people around you that can hold you up with some of these things? What do?
Yes.
Because my fear, and I don't think it's unfounded, is that, you make a decision, you make a ruling that people don't like. It happened in my court, one of the courts that's in my district a few years ago. For the life of me, I can't figure out why the judge made the ruling he made. He was a very conservative judge, and he made what was considered a left-wing, different ruling than people would have expected. My opinion is, he's privy to stuff that we're not. He's read the law, he's read the case, he makes the decision. That's why he's the judge and we're here, right? But people were brutal. Some people on this council, they wanted to impeach him, they wanted him to resign. They protested at the court. I spent almost an entire day visiting people in that court who had been traumatized by public figures coming, screaming and yelling and holding signs outside, and then they go to his house, and it's horrible. Did you want to do that?
Yes, I do.
So what you're talking about, right? It's real easy for the pundits and everyone to throw the mud at you when we don't like the decision. It's hard. I've had to check myself.
I was just gonna say, it's hard. But I have a support system, and I have a lot of close friends, and that's, that's something that I know goes with the job sometimes.
I mean, both your parents worked in the legal profession, so they know a bit about it, and you do too. But it doesn't mean it doesn't sting nonetheless, and it gets hurt nonetheless. And in your circle and your loved ones and everything, it's hard. How do you think the courts have employed, or give me your opinion, I suppose I'm asking, about the implementation of technology through the pandemic?
I think the courts did a very good job of getting Zoom up and running. We still use it in my courtroom. It works fairly well. I know it's not ideal for certain situations, and there's certainly situations where we need people in person for certain types of hearings. But I would say, I think they did a great job of getting it put together fairly quickly, considering the pandemic. We had never I had no experience with Zoom before the pandemic, and we all got trained fairly quickly, clerks as well as people that run the recording system. We had to.
Saw the battering of it.
Yes, we really had to, and I find in my session, in first session, it is extremely helpful even now, because we often get people brought into court on warrants, and we need their lawyers available, and they can get on Zoom. So for emergencies, we like everybody to try to come in person. I think it's helpful. It helps resolve cases, but certainly it has been a great resource for emergency hearings.
I personally think it's been a great access to justice, to be frank. I think it's enabled people to not have to, because a lot of people don't have the money.
Right.
And, it is the people's courts, the district courts, and I think it's given a lot of access to people, that maybe they're gonna show up.
Yes.
Because they don't have to take the whole day off from work. Never mind these attorneys, I'm surrounded by great attorneys here who sometimes have to be in 2 and 3 places at once, and then you're just sitting there. And I've listened to a plethora of men and women tell me in the last 10 years that they actually feel guilty about charging some of these people.
Yeah.
Because, they're just sitting there waiting to be. So I think I think the courts have done an outstanding job.
Yeah.
I actually think, I don't think our court is perfect, but I actually think the Massachusetts courts, I think the chiefs and all the different courts have even, we all know about we call it the Gantt study and everything. And I think the biggest thing is that we're able to look at ourselves and be objective about it. Or try to be objective. I mean, it's the reason we call it implicit bias is because it's implicit.
Yes.
I mean, right? I might think I don't have any, but I do.
Right.
I just don't know it. That's what the word means. So I concur with you. I think they've done a really great job. Does your court have what we call a Zoom room? Do you know? Where people, some of the courts have them, some of them don't. I've been taught.
Attorneys can Zoom to other courts. We don't have, it's not called, we don't have that specifically, but we have we have a council room for lawyers that they can sit in and make phone calls and do Zoom and.
I've had some really great meetings with Chief Justice Budd and Justice Georges on the use of technology in more creative ways to employ it. And as you know, I did ask you very pointedly that if you go to the bench, I hope that you will be creative. I know you're restrained in some of what you're judging, sentencing, but I also think there are ways that we can, peel the layers of the onion back, particularly to people who are younger, people who are addicts, and help them along the path and see this. Do you have any experience with people who are mentally, I don't want to say impaired, but, people have different disabilities, cognitive disabilities?
We do see it in my court. We've had recently some people, defendants that have come in that have autism. In my personal life, I have people that have disabilities that I'm aware, friends of mine that have children with disabilities. So I've seen it both personally and professionally. And I have found, I know in our court, it seems like for the most part that the parties try to work together toward having an evaluation done of the person to find out their disability and try to figure out a creative approach to resolving the case while still taking the victim's concerns into.
That you and I spoke,
Yeah.
pretty deep detail about that. It doesn't absolve someone of a crime, but it does mean that maybe as the people in charge, we need to take some special things into account.
Yes.
How about the LGBTQ plus community? I mean, we keep adding letters.
Yes.
But again, people know that that's a concern of mine, particularly because we have an epidemic of young gay, lesbian, plus kids living on the streets, working in the sex trades, becoming addicted. It's an epidemic, and it's a silent epidemic, and it's a very dangerous one. And I know particularly on the transgender thing, it's a hard issue for so many of us to get our heads around, but it's a real thing. And again, we're the adults, people safe. Have you encountered any people in that community in your courts or in your life that?
Oh, in my life, and I represented clients that were gay, and this was a while back, but when I was doing criminal work and when I was doing civil work, in my personal life, I've encountered all people from all walks of life, including the LGBTQ community. So I definitely, I'm young enough that had a lot of, experiences, personal experiences growing up with a lot of people that.
Well, it's interesting because it's been, the growth even in our state, we're considered, blue state, liberal state and everything. But honestly, the difference between when I first came into office, frankly, the scary persecution I was subjected to online, it was really scary. To now, where we might have an openly gay person be the governor. I mean, it's just light years away. It's amazing difference. And, I think equal marriage and other things sort of take some, like some and everything. But nonetheless, the prejudice and the implicit prejudices still exist. And again, as officers of the board, it's to make sure that people are safe, again, not absolved of crime. But it's just important to me that people are, when we sentence them, if we hold them in contempt, they're safe. They want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be acknowledged. Of course, they want to win. But even if they don't, those other things, what I hear, I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah, I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your
Councilor.
persistence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy.
Good morning. I just have a few questions for you. The questions that I've been asking every nominee. We talked about them on the phone. You spent a lot of time in district court. Do you think dangerousness here in 58 days are overused by prosecutors?
I do, at times, yes. And it depends on where you are. Certainly some counties to
Definitely.
some more than other counties.
I use an example that happened with one of my clients recently. Before I was involved, she had a 54-year-old woman worked at a law firm, had no criminal record at all. Got in an argument with her 20-year-old daughter about cleaning her room. It turned into a shoving match. The DA in Essex County filed a 58A on her. She spent 5 days in jail. Case that ultimately was dismissed. I found it to be outrageous, frankly. What kind of things would you do when a DA files a 58A in your court on a case that you don't necessarily think somebody should be held for 3 days automatically? And if it's the weekend, it's longer. That's what I.
Well, I would certainly looking at the statute. I mean, there has to be probable cause, and I know that's an easy.
Probable cause. She said she pushed her. So there's a crime there. Whether that's because it's domestic, it would fall under one of the predicate offenses. But a DA files it. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. The person is brought in handcuffs. Somebody with no record. It says we want him held for 3 days. We're not ready for the hearing yet. You put their feet to the fire and make them do it that afternoon?
I was just going to say, I think it would probably be prudent at that point to do that hearing as soon as possible, which I would think would be that afternoon.
Yeah, but Judge, we haven't seen it. We haven't talked to the victim yet. We just got the trial. We just got the police report. We got to talk to the victim and bring her in. We need the 3 days.
I'd have to hear both sides of that. I'd have to hear the defense lawyer, what he has to say. I have to hear the.
How about get on the phone and call the victim in right now? Send the police by to get him, and we can do it right now.
Well, certainly that's what I was thinking, is that it should be done as soon as possible.
I'm going to make one comment. I'm going to talk about the elephant that's not in the room, your father. He's very, very proud of you, as he should be. And I just want to point out that in my conversations with you and my reading of your background, you stand here on your own merit, 100%. You are very, very deserving of this job, and I will be voting for you next week. Your mother sitting across from me, she's beaming with pride like there's no tomorrow, justifiably so. You're deserving of the job, and I will be voting for you next week.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you very much. Councilor DiPaolo.
Thank you, Counselor. Good morning.
Good morning, Counselor.
I just wanted to ask a couple questions about how you would exercise your discretion in the district court. And you wrote in your application that there were a variety of factors. So I just want to ask you about a couple of them. One of them was the impact statement of any victims. And I'm wondering how the impact statement of a victim would inform how you would exercise your discretion. What would be an example of where that would come into play?
Probably, I would say occasionally, maybe even in sex crimes cases, it would be, I see it in my court most often in domestic violence, serious domestic violence cases. That's what we get in Superior. And sex crime cases, it seems to be, that seems to not necessarily, well, it would inform some aspect of my discretion in sentencing, because certainly there's a lot of different things that go into a plea on a sex crime case. They have to register and things like that. So it certainly takes some of that into account, and looking at all of that, you know, thinking about a victim in the case and, you know, the potential for those kind of crimes to have a lasting effect on somebody is just something that would be a kind of a small piece of the puzzle, along with many other factors.
It's an area that interests me because I wonder how we stay dispassionate when we're hearing impact statements. Because in the example that you gave, or even in the example of a child abuse case, it doesn't matter if the victim issues a statement or not. It doesn't matter if the victim is present or not. Crime is horrific, and the impact on the victim is going to be lifelong. Something like that, right? So I go back and forth because I wonder if we should give extra credence because the victim has to speak, or if we should give less credence because there is no victim to speak.
Right.
And I wonder how it has a place in the dispassionate application of law.
Yeah, that's
Makes sense to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that is something to think about, because
I'm sorry to interrupt you, I hear a lot about victims' rights, which are important, but it's like the victims who aren't there, who I wonder if we're equally concerned about, I guess.
that's true, yeah. And I agree with you on certain crimes that it's almost relevant whether they're, like you say, the crime is still horrific and it's still
If the legislation is well written.
yes.
And how about background and education of the defendant? If you're thinking about your discretion and decisions you're making, how would the background and education of the defendant, just as an example, what are some things that would?
That would be the background and education of a defendant, as well as their age, if they have any sort of cognitive disabilities or other issues that affect their decision-making and their way of thinking. Those are very important as far as sentencing, because everybody's different. Individuals are different, right? So you have to know, and, you know, hopefully their attorney would be able to give you most of that information, along with if an evaluation had been done or a clinician had met with them. So I think that's pretty important, because I especially with the kind of 19, 20, 21-year-olds that seem to come before the court that have not made good decisions, but we know that can be an area where they're not fully developed yet. And so that would certainly be something to take into account.
And
Knowing as much as you could know.
right, and sometimes incarceration may be necessary, but are young people coming out of our houses of corrections better for the time served?
I wouldn't think so. When I bar advocate work, it it didn't seem to be the preferable choice if somebody can receive some sort of probation and get help through programs and other resources.
And so it sounds to me like age is something you'd consider.
Yes.
Because we know about brain development, and I won't believe it
Excuse me.
on it, and you might do to consider it, or in my opinion, they've opened the door for that to be something that a judge would do. I have no further questions. I appreciate the other questions you answered from my colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Next, we'll hear from Counselor Mary Hurley.
Thank you. We spoke at some length.
I just checked. She signed on. I just texted her. She's been signed on for a while. Text back though.
Can you hear me? All right, so you can hear me.
There she is. Yeah.
Yes, Mary.
Okay, so we spoke at some length.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. I was asking you about the burden of proof in a motion to suppress.
Yes. Yes, and
What's
it is preponderance of the evidence. And that's the term I was searching for yesterday and could not find.
Okay. What's your philosophy on bail? When would you hold someone on bail?
I think that at times cash bail is appropriate. Certainly, there's many factors that go into considering that, including one of the most important, whether a defendant comes to court. We know that bail shouldn't be a punishment. It should be a incentive for people to return to court for their court hearings. And so I do think that there are circumstances when cash bail is appropriate. There may be circumstances where release on personal recognizance is appropriate. And there's certainly several different conditions that judges can use when weighing all the factors on the safety of the community and certainly many conditions that a defendant can be placed on in order to ensure that they're doing what they should be doing and come to court.
As it relates to dangerousness hearings, would you, in a case, make your determination based solely on the evidence that's presented to you? Or would you use your own common sense as it related to the conditions that you might use to release somebody?
I think I'd use both. I would certainly look at the evidence that was presented. And I would certainly use my common sense as a way if somebody was deemed dangerous, but there was a bail that could be placed on the defendant. And if there were conditions, you can certainly, I've seen throughout the pandemic, creative ways of putting conditions on people so that you ensure that they're not a danger to the community, but they can still reside at home, whether it's GPS, home confinement, drug testing, and the like. I would consider both of those things.
If you have someone before you who is already released on other criminal charges, and they're before you again, and they've allegedly committed a new crime, what would you do as far as revocation of bail and consideration of release after a hearing on revocation of bail in terms of the new charges?
That would depend. I would need to know the specific charges and the case. Certainly, I wouldn't have a problem revoking someone's bail if they picked up serious charges that were, and it would depend if they're released from the Superior Court on a serious matter, and they they pick up new charges that are of the same type of, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Certainly, it's very different if somebody, picks up a more minor charge, like operating with a suspended license or something. So there'd have to be a lot of considerations I would take into effect. Also, looking at, just like I said, the charges, the new charges and what the charges they're out on bail are. That would kind of all factor in.
All right. When you were giving your opening statement, I was thinking to myself how similar our two careers were or are, in that I was my father was a criminal attorney for many years in the Springfield and Western Mass area, and I worked in the DA's office and I worked in the city law department. So I had a lot of varying opportunities. My question is, why didn't you go into practice with your dad?
Oh, why didn't I?
Have you met Bob?
Well, I actually think the easy answer to that is that I had done a lot of civil litigation until I opened my own office. So we kind of practiced different, specialized in different areas of the law. And once I went into my own practice, that's when I decided to certified as a bar advocate and start doing appointed work. So I just kind of ended up in New Jersey at a civil firm, and when I returned to Massachusetts, that's what I knew. So I continued doing a lot of civil, different types of civil cases. And we just kind of, he did the criminal defense and I did the civil, so it's kind of worked out that way.
I get what you're saying, because all my father wanted to do was criminal. So I got everything else. Whether it was civil, torts, divorces, estates, wills, you name it, real estate. And I gotta be honest with you, working with him, I learned a lot, but he also drove me crazy. So I think if you were being totally candid, you would probably, now you're under oath, you would probably say, I couldn't do that because he drove me crazy.
Right?
That's between you and he.
Yeah.
So, people have mentioned that he's your dad and all that goes with it, and he's also governor's counselor. But the one thing that my father taught me early on was, this was when I was running for city council, that it was his name and his family's name that got me elected the first time. But after that, it was up to me to keep the job by doing the right thing and doing a good job. So I guess I would offer the advice that from there, I became mayor and then I was a judge for 20 years. And when I first started out, I was Eddie Hurley's daughter. And by the time I finished, he was Mary Hurley's father. So I hope that the same will be said about you.
Thank you. You do as well.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Councilor Joseph Herrera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. It was nice chatting with you the other day.
Yes.
I'm just looking at the package now, and I have one concern here. I thought your father taught you better than this. You've had no political contributions in the last 3 years?
No.
Not even to your favorite governance counselor? Wow, that's shocking. Mr. Preda, you would probably have an issue with that, right?
Counselor, I believe that I have the lowest amount of money in a campaign account in the Commonwealth. About $86.
Wow, you spent it all. Good for you.
Like, I get elected under my father and mother's names.
Yeah, that's great. No, I was tied up in traffic, but I listened to your narrative on the way in, and it was very, very good, and I've looked over your stuff. You have experience that a lot of people don't have, the diverseness of your experience. I've been at a insurance defense firm for 30 years now, and Jay Lynch speaks very highly of you. We had an 8-week trial in Brockton last year.
Yes.
And Jay said you were wonderful the way you handled, the work aspect of the job.
Tom, thank you.
In the midst of a $60 million case.
Yes.
So he has great things to say about you. And I've heard from a lot of others. You have great letters by a lot of judges supporting you that I admire and respect as well. So I'm not going to ask questions for the sake of asking questions, because I am thoroughly convinced that you'll be a great judge, and you have my vote next week.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We had a lengthy conversation over the weekend, so I don't have many more. You answered most of my questions. But a lot of lawyers, when they go to court, a lot of the lawyers are sole practitioners. So it's very difficult. Obviously, you can't be at two places at the same time. What's your philosophy in granting continuances?
I have that to me is something that's part of my job as a judge. I mean, lawyers are often tied up in various courts. I know that. I used to do that. I used to go to several courts in a day. And so even as a clerk, I'm very willing to give people continuances when I know they are trying to run a practice, trying to get their kids to school in the morning, trying to get to the first court of the day, trying to get to the second court of the day. That's something that I'm fairly willing to do. short of no good not a good reason, but I know how busy solar practitioners are. I was one.
Thank you. And another issue that I'm concerned about is your feeling about incarceration, or I should say rehabilitation as an alternative to incarceration. I think not all judges, but maybe a few judges, I think, incarcerate people, and maybe I think they should do more of a rehabilitation. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I think that especially at the district court level, rehabilitation is always preferable to incarceration if there's a way to do that. Certainly, there are serious cases that come in, and sometimes people crime warrants a period of incarceration. But in the district court, and you see a lot of people come in with substance abuse issues, with behavioral issues. There's programs that we can set people up with to address the issues they have. And probation is a way of doing that. It's, setting them up to go to drug treatment programs and then step down to sober homes. All of it that's my preference when people need a chance or even a second chance.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions. I do want to say this. This is the first time I met you, and it's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Look at your background. You have criminal experience. You have personal injury experience. What a great balance. So many people only have criminal, only have civil. You have a great balance. You seem to be a compassionate person. You definitely have the experience. More importantly than all to me is judicial temperament. And when I see you here today, I am super impressed. Your parents did a great job, Ricky and you. They both did a great job because in my mind, you're a superstar.
Thank you.
And let me tell you, next week, I am going to be proud to put your name before this council, and I wish you the very, very best.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll conclude the hearing.
Mr. Chairman.